Hey assistants, and welcome to this edition of Admin Chat, where I'm sharing the 4 fundamental skills that you need to do your best work and level up in this role over the next decade. Now, I've heard from a lot of people newly entering this role from a previous different profession or looking to level up as an administrative assistant, and they're wondering where they should focus their energy and their time and how they should pursue professional development to ensure that they can succeed in this role over the long term. Now, whether you're just starting out as an admin and you're eager to learn how to improve, or you're a seasoned executive assistant but still haven't quite mastered the ins and the outs of this role, I've got you covered. I'm sharing my hard-earned wisdom for ensuring a successful breakthrough in this role in whatever organization or industry you work in. I've got lessons to share about how I've simplified my understanding of this role and how I've been able to make an impact in each and every organization that I've been a part of. Let's jump in. So the first thing I want to share is a little bit about me. My journey to and within the executive assistant role, I think like most people, has been non-traditional. I sort of fell into this role, like a lot of people say, while I was in college, actually. And my journey has been really long and incredibly eventful. And I feel really grateful to have had the opportunities that I've had. I've worked in a wide variety of industries, including nonprofit and academia, in addition to corporate retail. And over the last 7 years, I've partnered with CEOs of some of the most influential companies in the world, including the president and CEO of Sephora and the founder and CEO of Twitch. And currently I'm supporting the founder and CEO of a fintech company based in Palo Alto, where every day I have the privilege of working with some of the brightest research scientists and engineers in the world. And we're working on inventing the internet for the future and pushing the cutting edge of both blockchain and cryptocurrency, which is incredibly exciting and rewarding work. I currently live in France, just outside of Paris, while my work happens mostly in Palo Alto, but across the globe more broadly. Now, what we're known for at Protocol Labs is launching the largest crypto SaaS in history, but there's actually a lot more on the horizon, which is super exciting. I'm also a mother of 3 adorable, lovely children, and in my spare time, when I have it, I also run a really fun, exciting blog called The Assistants List, where I share all of my tips, tricks, and best pieces of wisdom and advice for life in assistant land, which is where I live, and I think most of you who are watching this video inhabit as well. There's always fun things happening in life in assistant land, always new trends to discover, people to connect with, and new skills to develop. And I share all of that over at my blog. So if you have time after this video or you want to learn more about what I'm sharing, feel free to reach out to me on my blog page at theassistantslist.com. Now, I don't share all of my credentials and history to impress you, but rather to express to you what's possible, because I always say this to assistants: if I can do it, you can do it too. There really is almost no difference. It's just about focusing and developing your skills to make sure that you can make an impact and pursue the kind of career that you love. Now, regardless of what your background is, I want to say clearly that you are not stagnant. Your possibilities are truly endless. And these are just represent some foundational and fundamental skills that you can learn to improve your overall career and your prospects now and in the future. So the 4 fundamental skills that you're about to learn have been developed over a decade. This has come through intensive research, learning, and working every day as an executive assistant. And these are the exact skills that I've used over the course of my career, and the skills that I still use today as an executive assistant. I really think it's important for assistants to hear from actual executive assistants who are working every single day and partnering with some leaders of incredibly amazing organizations for the practical tools and steps that we use in order to make sure we have successful, productive working relationships with our executives. So let's check out what we're going to be going over today. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is how you can learn to earn trust with your executive. Earning trust, not just in the short term, but keeping it. We're also going to focus on the importance of driving alignment, developing a leadership mindset, which I think is probably one of the most important things that each of us can do right now that's totally free and is on each of our possibilities list. And finally, we're going to focus on building influence, which is one of the most important skills that you can develop in the future of work. The shape and nature of work is changing, and the skill sets that we need to not just survive, but to thrive in this role so we can partner with successful executives and engage in meaningful work that we actually enjoy and not that we're just being forced to do, means that we need to adapt our skills quickly to that changing environment. These are the skills that have stood out to me over the course of my career as being the most impactful to helping me pursue the career of my dreams. Let's start with earning trust. It can be incredibly difficult, and this is always a piece of advice that I hear people give to executive assistants, and that's to earn trust with your executive. But this always feels incredibly amorphous and also difficult to do. Trust matters in your organization, and it will continue to matter a lot. Regardless of what educational credentials you have, earning trust will be the most important commodity that you have. Your organization, team, and your executives' ability to trust you will allow you to be empowered with more autonomy and freedom in your work, which is something I think all of us are eager to have. With the rise of fluid organizations, trust is essential to your longevity within any given company. Fluid organizations are the new norm. I think most people won't continue on in a role. Really, it's likely that most of us will come in and out of organizations every 2 years is the prediction, which means that organizations are less likely to continue investing in, really giant departments versus smaller teams that are going to be able to adapt quickly to change, new people rotating in and out of leadership and different parts of that organization and team. So how do we go about actually earning trust? Because this is something that we all hear, but a lot of us aren't fully clear on what steps we should actually take in order to earn trust with our executives and their broader teams that they manage. We're going to dive into that today. The first thing I want to talk about are the 2 dimensions of earning trust. The first is how we communicate, our communicative dimension, and then the second is interactive. And this really focuses on how we engage with people. What kinds of actions and relationships do we have with people in order to earn trust? The communicative aspect talks about building trust through communication, and there are all different kinds of ways that we can do this. And the interactive one focuses on the ways that we act and relate to others. And this will have a huge impact, not only on how we develop and build trust, but also more importantly, how we maintain trust over time. Because trust is a really fluid thing. It comes and it goes, and it can wane and ebb and flow as time goes by. You'll notice we've talked about, I'm sure in your career, that trust has been something that you feel can either come with, a strong performance, but also can sort of minimize or decrease with that. So we want to talk about how we can maintain trust over the long term, not just because we performed a task well. And to do that, we need to make sure that we understand the dimensions of trust. A lot of people talk about the importance of not burning bridges in your career. Make sure you don't burn bridges, make sure this ends well. But I don't hear a lot of people talking about the importance of building bridges. And I want to invite each of you to consider, as you spend time engaged in your work, what kind of bridges are you building and where are you building them to? I think this is a really important question that I've asked myself over the course of my career that has helped to make sure that my actions are guided and intentional. And think about that for a moment. Take some time to write down what kinds of bridges you're building and where are they going to. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is establishing credibility. And credibility is one of the most important things that we can do in order to start building our bridge of trust. Credibility is earned when you mean what you say and you say what you mean. Don't over or underestimate your capabilities. And this is really key. A lot of people feel like it's easier to underestimate their capabilities because they don't either think they can accomplish something or they're unsure. Now, if you have capabilities to learn quickly, be clear about that. I don't know that technology, but I feel confident in my ability to come up to speed quickly. And if that changes throughout the project or task or life cycle of your work, be clear about that as well. If you can't make that unrealistic deadline that your executive has continued to push on you, don't be afraid to be clear about whether or not that's realistic for you. It's especially easy to get in over our heads when we start a new position because we're eager to prove ourselves. Just be sure that your eagerness doesn't get you into a pickle, because I feel that worse than, not being able to meet deadlines is turning in sloppy, half-baked work. It's better to be clear that you won't be able to meet that deadline rather than turning in something that feels half-baked, underdone, and sets the standard for the kind of quality of work that they think you're going to be delivering. Especially the ramifications of doing that are important to consider. Resentment can build when your work gets redistributed and pushes back the project or deadline anyway. So be mindful of that. The second thing, and this is part of, establishing your credibility, is to execute. This is really where our credibility comes into play. So when we prove our ability to accomplish tasks through thorough and efficient work, people are going to naturally begin to trust you. But the key here is consistency. And I always say on time over time. So you need to be able to deliver on time over a long period of time, not just the first 30 days or the first 90 days. Trust is going to be maintained over time through consistent execution. It's not enough to sort of show up and be super person on day one or week one or month one. You have to show up often. When you're a dependable team player during the highs and more importantly during the lows that all companies invariably go through, you distinguish yourself as a reliable coworker who's worthy of trust. Now, this is something I've learned that over the course of my career that my executives really highly value. Isn't my ability to show up when numbers are great, things are doing good, we've just got back from a vacation. It's when things are really going bad, when everybody feels a lull. How am I able to show up and continue performing and pushing through that energetic lull or where people are feeling sort of negative about? Now, this has been really key for me over the course of my career. And I think that making sure that you focus your efforts and energies on consistent execution will probably be one of the most valuable things that you can do, because this is actually where most people fail, is in the detailed execution of work consistently over time. Most people will be excited and pumped up and be able to produce, for 3 months maybe. But when it comes to 9 months to 12 months, that's when things usually start to fall by the wayside. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to be perfect, but it does mean that your average needs to be really high, right? So it doesn't mean that we don't have days where we fall off and things like that, but it does mean that on average, our work is consistent over time and high quality. The next thing I'll say for building trust is to ask for help. Now, read this slide carefully, right? Because as assistants, there are a lot of myths surrounding why asking for help, especially in the workplace, probably isn't a good thing for us. But I think understanding how the simple act of requesting assistance can help you build trust, and it could possibly be one of your greatest tools. Everyone wonders, how can asking for help build trust? The first myth I want to talk about is assistants don't ask for help because we already know what to do and that's why we're assistants. False. We show true leadership when we demonstrate that we're willing to learn. When we ask for help, we open ourselves up to others by being vulnerable and letting them know that we don't have all the answers. People find it difficult to trust people who have never asked them for help. More often than not, you'll find that your sincere petitions for advice create opportunities for deeper engagement. Now, I want to be clear here that this opportunity for deeper engagement does come once you've done the effective work on your end to really solution find, and making sure that you're asking for meaningful, needle moving insights rather than sort of quick answers to questions like, where can I find this in the employee handbook? That isn't necessarily an opportunity for deeper engagement. Strategic questions about the purpose and the why really help to provide opportunities for deeper engagement. And I suggest that your opportunities for help come from that sort of spirit. The second myth I'd like to dispel is that asking for help is a sign of ineptitude. It's just not what assistants do. False again. Asking for assistance reveals that you have more than your own self-aggrandizement in mind. You're looking out for the good of the broader company. So your team or your executive can look into how you approach problems, and they can see that you're focused on doing a great job, and that you value doing the job right rather than just getting something done quickly. When others see you proactively engage in this kind of productive collaboration, they tend to want to join in. Human nature developed in tribal settings, and we're hardwired to want to feel like we're a part of a community. So when you stop and ask for help, you actually create opportunities for this community to form around your ideas. It's also a really great opportunity, as I mentioned, for people to understand how your mind works when you're faced with a problem or task. And when they see, they can either identify sort of incongruencies in your thinking or admire the way that you're approaching problems, whether or not it's accurate. And this has been a really great opportunity. I've had so many great opportunities over the course of my career through asking for help that it's just been really amazing. I've had some of the most productive, informative conversations, not only with my executives, but also with their broader team when I've done this. I would also say that if you're an executive or administrative assistant and you're kind of working siloed, or you might be the only executive assistant in your organization, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't reach out to your broader team to get help. And it also means that you should be proactive in finding networks of other assistants to reach out to and engage with. And the wonderful thing about what's happening now in our industry is that there are so many communities being led by assistants that are burgeoning, where we're able to go into and find a wealth of information, a treasure trove of connections of people who are really passionate about this role, growing and development. And your questions and conversations can stimulate something incredibly important. So please take advantage of those. The next thing we're going to talk about is driving alignment. And this is something that has been incredibly important over the course of my career, something that's always noted in every single one of my peer and performance reviews. Alignment is key for productivity. I don't think I can really stress this enough. Acting with intent, and when you do act with intent, by doing things like driving alignment, really sort of shines a light on the kind of quality of work that you're focused on getting done. Now, whether you're working from home or in office, maximizing your synchronous time with your executive and your team is important. If you're working from home, it's clear you're probably not going to have those sporadic or spontaneous opportunities for synchronous time like you would if you're in an office. But it's still true that in an office, a lot of us are siloed in our desks or cubicles or working stations, and our executives are in and out of meetings that we may or may not be in throughout the day. So synchronous time with the people that we work with is still incredibly valuable, and making sure that we maximize that, the best way to do that is through driving alignment. So there's a couple ways that I think that you will be able to focus on driving alignment. The first thing I want to talk about is getting clarity on the scope of work. Now, the scope of work is something many of you have probably heard about through project management, and it's incredibly valuable for executive assistants. Focusing on understanding what the goals, the prerequisites, the previous work, and major risks are will be one of the most important things that you can do. Whether this is one-on-one with your executive because he or she has given you a task, or with your broader team because you either don't have a project manager, you're acting as the project manager, or you're the person who asks these important questions. Now, I found this to be true over the course of my career in all those situations. One-on-one with my executive assistant who is having me manage and take on special tasks on his behalf. 2, in the instance where we did not have a project manager and I was filling that role. And also in the cases where we have had a project manager who really had a lot to juggle and wasn't able to drive for alignment in these specific areas. A lot of the time I'm managing projects between and with my executive and our team's project manager. So these kinds of questions are helpful regardless of what situation you're in. Understanding the goals is probably the most important thing that you can do to drive for alignment. Now, it might seem like this is pretty obvious, but actually, oftentimes, the goals, people understanding what the goals of a project or task are actually really fuzzy. And we don't realize until further down the road that there's actually misalignment. People thought we were getting ready to do this in order to do that. And if any of those variables are misaligned, it can lead to really bad decision making around the project. A lot of times we'll have to pivot. And if we don't understand the goals, especially the why, we'll likely pivot in the wrong direction. As an executive assistant, I view it as my job to ensure that first, myself and my executive are aligned on the goals of a specific project. And the second thing I try to focus on is making sure that my executive, myself, and the broader team are all aligned on the goals of the project. So making sure you have this as one of your arsenal of questions to ensure that you're asking in and outside of meetings or via email is incredibly important. The second thing you need to focus on during your scope of work are prerequisites. Now, this is the foundational work that will set you up for success because you're clear on these. When you understand the prerequisites for getting started on a project or tasks, you'll be able to do the work in the order that it needs to be done, rather than having to backtrack, undo, or potentially redo work, which is incredibly frustrating, not just for yourself, but also for your broader team. Now, what are some prerequisites that we can think of? For example, data that needs to be collected before you start a project, not after. Getting clear on what those specifically are is one of the most important things that you can do. The third thing, I'll say is previous work. This can be something that is easily overlooked. It's rare that you'll find someone in a meeting talking about previous work. It's even more rare that the work you're talking about is brand new or hasn't been addressed before, especially if you're starting out in your role. So if, for example, you're focused on what your scope of work is as an executive assistant being new in a role, understanding what the previous work around this has been done. Who was the executive assistant here before? Why did they succeed? Why did they fail? What work has been in place? What does calendar management look like? If it's a project, for example, you'll want to understand what work has happened around this project in the past. Was this something that got picked up and then put down? Was it improperly prioritized, and why? Have the circumstances around this work changed? And if they have, how have they changed? These are really important questions that you'll want to understand to make sure that you're getting started on the right foot. And finally, understanding your scope of work should really focus on the major risks. So major risks are something that not everyone really likes to talk about because it's kind of a Debbie Downer topic, right? Major risks, that's no fun. We want to say, hurrah, hurrah, go team. Totally understandable, but it's also equally important that you make sure that the work that you're doing is work that has calculated the risks and has prioritized appropriately around them. No one likes to discuss this, but somebody has to put on the brakes on excessive dreaming and make sure that we're doing the work to prepare ourselves for risks down the road. For example, is that deadline too tight? And if so, why? How can we mitigate against it? What kinds of steps can we take proactively now to ensure that this doesn't happen? So one of the things an example I like to bring up, especially with new executive assistants, are the major risks to you succeeding in a relationship with your executive. What are the major risks to that? your executive not prioritizing your one-on-ones. If you're new in this role or you're coming off a performance review, this is something you should absolutely bring up, especially if you're new. Hey, I want to, meet and talk about what are the major potential roadblocks to success in my time in this role. Talk about, first consider what those risks might be. I always say if there isn't mutual respect and a mutual investment, that's always going to be a roadblock. That's going to be a major risk to your success and a roadblock. If you're working with an executive who doesn't prioritize your one-on-one time together, who isn't invested in making sure that the lines of communication are always and perpetually open, who isn't interested in upward and cyclical feedback, those are potential risks for your success in the role. And the same goes for projects. Considering what those potential risks are is hugely important to making sure that expectations are clear and even across the board. Most of the time, reasons that we don't succeed in our roles or with projects and tasks is because those expectations weren't clear. And if you fail to discuss the major risks, there is no way for those expectations to be clear. The next thing that you can do to drive alignment more specifically are asking the triple dub questions. You're probably thinking, what are the triple dub? Is that the internet? No, it is who, what, when. I want to say this was made popular by Google, I believe, but it could have been Apple. It's definitely popular in the Valley, Silicon Valley, where I have spent the majority of my career. So the triple dub is who does what and by when. Every single task, project, question needs to have this question behind it. The triple dub, I say, because it's really easy to remember. Who does what by when? So who is actually doing the work that's been agreed upon? A lot of times people leave meetings or conversations with their executives, and you'd be surprised how often this is not stipulated. If you leave your org and the one thing that you're known for is being the triple dub person, give yourself a huge pat on the back. If you become known as the triple dub person, you will be the person that everyone will miss because these 3 questions are so important for productivity. Aligning on what actually needs to be done. What specifically is being done, right? So we leave meetings, we have this hoorah moment. Yeah, we need to make sure that we, have a conversation with such and such. So what specifically are we asking for here? Are we asking for someone to arrange a meeting? And if so, who needs to be in that meeting? Who's responsible and accountable for arranging that meeting? And finally, when does that meeting need to take place? Is there a specific deadline for it? What are the consequences if this doesn't get done in a certain time period? So I always say that driving alignment is around asking high value questions. And the triple dubs are probably the most high value questions that you can ask. Of course, understanding the scope of work is really important, but the triple dub is really what gets the engine moving. That's what sets everything in motion are these 3 questions. And setting things in motion without clarity on these 3 questions literally guarantees and sets people up for failure now and in the future. So make sure you are being the triple dub person in your org. Who does what by when? This is key. I will say, I feel that this is if you take nothing else from this, take the triple dubs with you, and make sure you're asking those questions in your meetings. And the final thing I'll say, for driving alignment is probably feels counterintuitive, but, it's really not. It's respectful pushback. So trust has a lot to do with gut feelings. It isn't measurable, and whether people admit it or not, it's incredibly difficult to trust a yes man. If you are the kind of person who prides yourself on constantly saying yes to absolutely everything, I want to invite you seriously to reconsider the value that you're bringing to your executive and your org. Respectfully pushing back, understanding how and when to do that will distinguish you from people who simply are saying yes all the time. Those people are usually overcommitted, they're redoing or overdoing work, they're causing frustration and resentment around their organization and likely with their executive. It's Probably your executive might not even say it to you. They might say something like, I love that you're always saying yes. But really, there will be a sense that this person lacks discernment because they're unable to determine everything in the world can't be a yes, right? Like there isn't just a yes for everything. So understanding when to say no feels counterintuitive, especially to executive assistants. Wasn't I hired to do everything my boss asks me to? It's the moment that it's asked. No, actually you weren't. You were hired to be a force multiplier, an energy manager, and a highly functioning second brain. And our second brain doesn't say yes to everything all the time. It's not up to, your boss to insist that you say yes to everything. It's really important that you make sure that your executive understands that you're able to engage in respectful pushback. And I always say that it's important to help you find your authentic voice. And finding your authentic voice means being able to speak the truth with respect, whatever it may be. And over time, you'll come to find that your executive welcomes your input and values your opinion even more than if you just kept going along to get along. Being a trusted partner is a role that reflects fluidity, a strategic mind, and highly honed critical thinking skills. If you really want to move into your full potential in this role, you need to employ respectful pushback, because that's how you're going to be able to shift yourself into the person who gets dumped with tasks because they say yes to everything, and into the person who is a valued sounding board and business partner with your executive that they look to for advice, guidance, and thought partnership. So I always encourage you to please engage in respectful pushback. If you have asked those Tripledub questions, that is a form of respectful pushback. Making sure that you're being critical is a form of respectful pushback. So don't be afraid to use the above questions in order to respectfully push back on work. And ask really poignant questions like, how do we deprioritize what's already on our plate in order to make room for these new items? Rather than just saying, yes, 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 we can, I will. Make sure that there's clarity and intent behind the work that you're taking on, the projects that you're agreeing to collectively and individually with your executive. All right, so the third skill I'm excited to jump into is the leadership mindset, where to put your mental energy. Leadership is a series of behaviors informed by the mindset that motivates them. Now, it's kind of easy to think of a leadership mindset and, think of yourself as that means I'm in charge. Wrong. It's much more than asking ourselves, what would I do if I were in charge? The kind of mindset that leaders adopt centers around 4 key themes. According to Professor Ryan Gottfredson and Chris Riena, in their article, Great Leaders in the Harvard Business Review, they outline 4 mindsets that leaders should lean into in order to identify themselves to be more effective. And this is something that I've actually taken deeply to heart and have adopted in my own working style. Let's go ahead and review those. The first is the growth mindset, the learning mindset, the deliberative mindset, and finally the promotion mindset. Now, all of these mindsets also have sort of counters to them where there is an opposite to each of these. And whether we notice it or not, many times we'll potentially be engaged in the opposite of a leadership mindset that will help to see us be more successful in not only our current roles, but also in the future as well. Now, the growth mindset centers around understanding that people have the ability to grow their talents and their skill set. And this stands in contrast to the fixed mindset of maybe seeing things as more stagnant. If I have a bad relationship with my executive, for example, I really don't see how to improve that, and it's a bad relationship that can't get better. Versus a growth mindset that sees an ability to grow and improve that relationship, to grow skills within yourself and with your executive on how to improve communication and task management. A growth mindset also centers around understanding how your team might be able to grow and develop over time, rather than seeing things as fixed, broken, and irreparable. We see that there's ability to sort of transcend and transform those kinds of relationships and interactions. This has been incredibly important for me because it shifts my thinking on how I engage with people. I don't see broken things as broken. I view them as opportunities. What am I supposed to be learning here? How can I learn that? And more importantly, how can I apply what I'm learning about this relationship to the way that I work with this person? The second thing I found that's been hugely important is the learning mindset. And this is about focusing on developing our own capabilities and also mastering something new in order to expand my current skill set. Unfortunately, I feel that this is something that really gets left behind with executive assistants or assistants more broadly. The sense seems to me that, we are who we are, we do what we do, and that's really kind of the beginning and end of our role. When the reality is that our role is dynamic, far from being stagnant or sort of officially defined. The role is incredibly dynamic. And over the next 10 years, that dynamism is only going to increase. What we're going to be needed for and how we're going to engage in the future of work is only going to continue developing. So it's incredibly important that if you haven't adopted it yet, you begin to nurture a learning mindset in yourself. I encourage people to do this by beginning to learn a new skill. And there are literally tons of places for you to do this at. Khan Academy, Udemy, a whole host of Teachable. There's a whole host of websites. I think at the time that I'm recording this, Harvard is actually offering several of their classes free of charge for people who are experiencing, stay at home or furlough work during the pandemic. So there are literally a whole host of opportunities for you to engage in mastering a new skill in order to expand your skill set. I will say, if you are not documenting and haven't reflected on what skill set, what new skill you would like to master this year, you begin doing that now. And if that first skill is adopting a leader's mindset, I'm going to applaud you. Doing that is a skill. Learning how to embody and nurture these mindsets daily, weekly, and incorporate them into how you do your work will be incredibly valuable, not just to you, but also to your work. So focusing on how you can expand your skill set and your capabilities outside of sort of what predefined, limiting ideas about what you need to be doing. If that means investing in data science courses, accounting, whatever it may be, learn a new skill, try it. And that can be something super fun like woodworking or rock climbing. There are a whole host of important crossover skills that you can learn while doing all of these other kinds of fun, ostensibly non-work related skills that you could be mastering. The third mindset I think is important to focus on is the deliberative mindset, where you focus on accepting all kinds of information that could help you address in new and more effective ways some of the problems that you might be facing. The deliberative mindset is something that really contemplative people probably focus on a day-to-day basis, but it's also easy to overlook because, especially as assistants, we often feel that we're rushing from task to task, thing to thing, item to item. So we don't spend a lot of time traditionally being incredibly deliberative and thoughtful in the way that we work. Finding and absorbing all kinds of information. If you've heard any of my conversations or talks before, you've probably heard me talk a lot about the importance of going on safari. I do this all the time because it's how I nurture the deliberative mindset in myself. Now, what does it mean to go on safari? Well, I have a lot of other talks. You should probably go check out my blog too, where I talk a lot more about the importance of going on safari. But generally, it's the idea of investigating or going on the hunt for important pieces of information so that I have a clear picture of the what and the why things are going on in the organization and what's happening in my executive's atmosphere. This is something that is, again, overlooked by a lot of assistants, but can be incredibly valuable and really make you an indispensable asset in your organization. Because as much as people want to get things done quickly, having somebody who has done the work to be truly thoughtful and thorough is really invaluable in a world of do, go, go, go. And the final mindset is the promotion mindset. And this mindset is about strategically identifying the specific purpose, goal, and destination and optimizing your workflow around these things. It's really about acting with high levels of intent. And it's not just about getting a promotion, but really about promoting productivity in really efficient ways versus sort of just getting things checked off a list. It's about making sure that we're acting and choosing our actions with intent, that they actually move the needle productively, not just in really easy ways so we can get things done and kind of be over it. I think that considering the ways that you could apply this to your own decision making, whatever your title is, can be really important. If you have time while watching this video or after, reflect on how you might be able to incorporate these 4 mindsets into the way that you're doing your work and interacting with your executive and their broader team today. What would it look like for you to, for example, incorporate a growth mindset in the way that you're interacting with your executive and the broader team? Perhaps the relationship has, soured with a coworker in some way. How could a growth mindset really change that perspective for you and help to transform the relationship from its current state into where you'd like to see it go? What would it look like for a learning mindset to be applied to some of your goals for this year? Do you have specific learning goals this year around mastering something totally new and completely outside the box? Have you thought about what that would mean? And what are some of the crossover skills that you could learn in mastering a new skill that could be applied to what you're doing today? How are you working deliberatively and contemplatively in the way that you execute your work? Are you focused on getting, as many check marks on your checklist there as possible? Or are you focused on making sure that you're doing the most important work, the most high value work, and spending your energy there and helping to focus your executive's energy there as well? And finally, are you promoting work? Is your work promoting sort of needle moving activities that are going to get the job done? And how are you engaging in that work to make sure that it gets done? I think a leadership mindset is really transformational. And candidly, organizations are really looking for leaders today. People who aren't necessarily obsessed with titles, but who are concerned with making an impact and having an influence. And more in organizations, that's what leadership looks like. Organizations are becoming incredibly horizontal compared to what they looked like even 7 years ago. More and more organizations have people who are incredibly passionate about being in places where they can make a real impact versus sort of being, one on a million ladder hierarchy. If you are the kind of person who can lean into leadership with humility and the team in mind, you're really going to have the opportunity to go far. Being able to communicate that on your resume and in your interview will be incredibly important for landing the kind of job and being in the kind of career that you want over the long term. And these are really the 4 mindsets that I talk about and demonstrate, not only on my resume, but also in my interview when I'm going after a role or I'm excited to work with a new organization. And when people hear me talk about these things, they reflect on how important it is not only to hear somebody say this in an interview or talk about it on their resume, but also how valuable it could be for their own organization to have someone in here who is thinking like this. So I think there is a real opportunity for anyone who is on this video, if you've made it this far, to write down how you could apply these, especially over the next year, but continue to nurture and develop these over, the next 5 years in the course of your career. Finally, we'll talk about the importance of building influence. Now, this skill is obviously one that I think everyone is talking about because influence has become a sort of buzzword in our culture, right? Like everyone's a social media influencer. People are getting influenced in all kinds of ways. And it's a lot less sort of direct marketing in your face and more sort of building a presence that shows people that you're the kind of person who they can confidently follow, and whose input and opinions can be incredibly valued. So we'll start with the importance of empathetic listening. We'll talk about sort of empathetic listening and how this can be done. We'll talk first about being a team player. So being a team player is something that a lot of people say, but they don't really know what that means. It's really more than just sort of cheering in the corner and saying, rah, rah, go team. Although that feels good and everyone certainly wants a cheerleader. Being a team player really requires sort of two components, focusing on the whole and being a guide. Companies are transitioning to small teams approach because it's been made famous by the most profitable organizations in the world, including Amazon and Apple specifically. And they work really hard on solving complex problems, but they're able to do it incredibly efficiently because their teams are small. They benefit from a lack of bureaucracy that can stifle creativity, and also from a lack of complex communication channels that can prevent smart people from solving problems quickly. So more and more, you're likely to be working within organizations, even if they are massive, like say Apple, for example, will have groups of small teams working on projects. Understanding what it really means to be a team player then is crucial to finding long-term success in the future of work. And getting people to see you as a team player could actually be easier than a lot of you think. So I focus on when joining a new team, a lot of people, especially veteran members, will usually try to assert their positions in a group early on. And rather than trying to compete and prove yourself, it's important to focus on helping to facilitate group synergy. In other words, do glue work. And I talk a lot about this in a few of my other talks, and I'm currently writing a paper on the importance of this. But this is really about making sure that the group has a synergy, has the ability to work effectively with each other over the short and the long term, helping to resolve conflicts by creating broader understanding. Versus sort of making sure that people know that you're the person who does this specific thing. It's really about unblocking people so that they can do their best work. And the second thing I talk about is being a guide. Being a guide is really important on a team because it's not often that people step into this position. People will typically be, looking for either jockeying for a leadership position or making sure that they get to do the tasks that they feel most passionate about. But being a guide isn't necessarily about making sure that you're the leader and that you get credit. It's really about helping to approach team missteps with curiosity rather than critiques. When a group is falling behind, for example, and this applies to whatever team you're working on, including just with your executive. If you all are falling behind on key deliverables, I say use the art of humble curiosity to pose questions that deepen thinking and broaden perspectives, because people are much more receptive to questions than they are to critiques. And that's universally true. So guiding the group to investigate new solutions that will demonstrate your commitment to the team rather than just to your own success. And this is a really important component of building influence, because when people see you as a team player, they notice that you're in this together and you help to create a shared sense of reality. that will allow people to trust you more and to follow your suggestions more. Now, I will say though that influence is more than just, power. It's really about persuasion. It's more authoritative than authoritarian. And the difference between these is really subtle, honestly, but it's very distinct. A little to the left, and you're the person who everyone avoids taking meetings with. A little to the right, and you're the one everyone complains about. So how do we distinguish between these subtle differences and make sure that we get it right? Well, Carol Goldman found that when we listen with empathy and we present warm body language and reinforce positive emotions, we're able to get the kind of influential leadership that we need, who don't necessarily need authority to get the job done. And that leads us to empathetic listening. I talk a lot about the importance of not just waiting for your turn to talk, which unfortunately is what a lot of people do when they're supposed to be listening. I think it's really important to listen more than you speak. Genuine listening usually results in empathy because we gain a more intimate understanding of the concerns that our executive or our team is facing. To do this effectively, we need to be attentive. We need to allow the other person to speak freely without interrupting. And we need to reflect back on what we've heard. You may be familiar with the guiding principle, seek to understand before being understood. So prioritizing understanding other people versus making sure that other people understand us. Especially as executive assistants, I think leaning into this guiding principle can help us to be really effective in our organizations. But more importantly, when people see you as the kind of person who is understanding, they're more likely to listen when you start talking because they know that you've privileged and provided understanding for them. It's the principle of reciprocity. And generally, this is something that is incredibly impactful when you're working with other people. Finally, for building influence, I think it's important to understand the role of emotional affect. So the emotions that you have and that you come to work with, we're all emotional beings. None of us is living in a state of pure stoicism, free from, the emotional ups and downs of our personal lives and our work lives as well. And understanding the role of emotions in ourselves primarily, but also for our executives and for our teams is incredibly important. So it's easy to write off the emotional importance, especially when we're working in a corporate office, because we're supposed to sort of, remove our emotions from this. But coming to work as our whole selves, including our emotional states, is really important. And making sure that we're cognizant of our own emotional states and how they affect others is also really important. People want to see that you're the kind of person who can do this. Studies have shown that even when we're using our rational brains, our emotions actually continue to have a huge influence over us. So knowing that you're the kind of person who is aware of this rather than sort of shunting it under the rug will help people to be more confident that you're the kind of person who can make good decisions using sound judgment. Everyone on your team, and especially your executive, is dealing with issues and emotions outside of work. It's not about being falsely optimistic, but it is about acknowledging the role that emotions play in how we make decisions. So I encourage people to do a couple of things. Tackle challenges with confidence. Confidence persuades people, whether it's negative or positive. It provides security where there might otherwise be none. Emotions are infectious, so when you're empowered, it's easy for other people to feel that way too. If you want your executive to continue trusting you with more complex, autonomous tasks, you need to display confidence when you're taking on work. And that doesn't mean sort of, I can do anything. Confidence is displayed when you understand clearly what the task is, you are not afraid to respectfully push back, get clarity, ask questions, and set boundaries. Those are things that a confident person does. And it's easy to get that confused because a lot of people sense that confidence is the ability to say yes to absolutely everything and I'll take on every task. But really, that shows people that you're actually afraid of saying no, not that you're confident in your ability to actually get everything done. So displaying confidence kind of seems counterintuitive, but there are a lot of practical steps that you can take from earlier in this video for how you can sort of display confidence in taking on challenging tasks. The second thing I focus on is displaying enthusiasm. And I think this is important because this really helps to set the mood and tone for how people are going to present work to you now and in the future, and also how your teams are going to work together. Enthusiasm isn't necessarily sort of a false sense of joy, but it is important to understand that every challenge or task is an opportunity. And when you see things that way, it's a lot easier to be excited and enthusiastic about the work that you're getting ready to take on. Rather than, I don't want to do this, a growth mindset and especially a learning mindset really help to transform a problem into an opportunity and create genuine enthusiasm for a project or task that you're getting ready to take on. And finally, I talk about passion. Passion is not enthusiasm. They are actually distinct, although often confused and conflated for each other. Passion is really, it comes from the Latin word meaning to suffer, long suffering. Passion is really the ability to continue going on and pursuing something wholeheartedly, even when it's gotten tough and challenging. And this isn't something that we think about when we think about passion, because a lot of times what we love to think about is sort of what makes us feel good, what gets us excited to do something. And that is an emotion that will come and go. But passion is really the ability to continue channeling a positive outlook, even when things are difficult or incredibly challenging. So I encourage people to act and to lead with passion when they're getting ready to engage in work that is particularly sticky or challenging. And when people see you exhibiting these three characteristics and emotions, including confidence, enthusiasm, and passion, they are likely to see you as a person of influence. One, because emotions are infectious, right? So when people see us doing something, they're likely going to do it too. The more you smile, the more other people are smiling, the more it kind of is a self-reinforcing cycle. And it is really a renewable resource. So your enthusiasm leads to enthusiasm of your coworkers, of your executives, and it will become like a self-reinforcing cycle for you all to sort of nurture each other in that way. But also it helps you to be the kind of person that people look to for those things. And that's really where the heart of influence is your ability to establish yourself as a person that people look to for guidance and for inspiration. And these are three of the things that I've used even when I'm feeling like, okay, is this are we going to make this? I lean into my, enthusiasm, passion, and confidence to help reassure not only myself, but others as well. So I want to thank you all who have made it through this video for walking through the 4 fundamental skills that you need to do your best work in this role over the next decade. I want to make sure that each of you knows that it's totally up to you to make the changes that you want to see in your career. I go over a lot of those changes in detail on my blog, theassistancelist.com. And I'm currently working on a really special project with some awesome assistants in the workforce that I think will go a long way to helping us all move our broader industry in the right direction over the next 10 to 20 years. So please stay tuned for that. Check me out on Instagram, where I'm always sharing tons of information in my stories, and on my blog at theassistancelist.com. You can follow me on Twitter and connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, concerns, or just want to chat about being an executive assistant and learn more about what life in assistant land is like for me. Thanks so much.